Chapter 1. The Savage Jungle. The jungle was alive, pulsing with an ancient, savage rhythm, and Rax Corva could feel it in every inch of his skin, the air pressing against him, thick with humidity and the smells of an ecosystem unknown to him. The smell of alien flowers, their tendrils hanging like delicate threads from trees, mixing with the musky scent of rotting vegetation. The scent of death was pervasive, subtle but present, lingering in the air like a reminder of what awaited anyone foolish enough to tread too far into this forsaken jungle. It was a world where the landscape itself seemed to hunger for life, eager to devour any intruders. Rax had become one such intruder. His world, a galaxy of endless war and conquest, had led him to this an alien jungle far from the battles and the wars he had fought so long and hard. He had never thought his life would end this way, not like this, tied to a rock, bound by chains, left as bait for the very beasts that roamed these savage lands. He had been a soldier, no, not just a soldier, a warrior, a man of distinction in his home galaxy, famed for his prowess in battle. He had led armies, crushed enemies underfoot, and been the very fist of his people's power. But here, in the jungle, none of that mattered. His weapons were useless, his strength reduced to nothing. He had been captured by a race of merciless beings, a ruthless species that had decided to leave him to die in this wilderness. They didn't see him as a person, but as a trophy to be claimed, a tool for their sport. The mercenaries, cold and indifferent, had watched him from the shadows as he fought to free himself from the chains. They had left him here, shackled and vulnerable, with only the brutal elements and the creatures of the jungle to deal with. To them, he was nothing more than an inconvenience to dispose of in a way that brought them amusement. The chains that held his wrists were forged from a metal he had never seen before, dark, smooth, and impossibly strong, made to withstand the strongest of forces. The links dug into his skin, blood and sweat mixing, stinging every time he shifted his weight. The metal burned his skin, a reminder of how truly helpless he was in this moment. His arms ached from the strain, but there was little he could do to alleviate it. There was no one coming to help him. His people had long since abandoned him, and now, here he was, suspended in the middle of this hellish landscape, nothing but a piece of bait for the predatory creatures of the jungle. Every now and then, he would hear them low growls that seemed to reverberate from the depths of the jungle. The sound of massive creatures, lumbering through the underbrush, their claws scraping against the ground, or their heavy breath blowing through the air like the wind. Rax had seen them before, just at the edge of his vision, too large, too terrifying to comprehend. The beasts of this jungle were unlike anything he had encountered before. In the darkness of the jungle, they moved like shadows, their glowing eyes reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight as they prowled through the thick foliage. Rax had never feared death. In his many years of war, he had stared it down countless times, charging into battle without hesitation, without doubt. But here, in this alien world, trapped in the iron grip of his chains, he could feel it, fear. The fear that the jungle was alive with something darker than mere animals. It was as if the land itself had a consciousness, a hunger, and Rax was its next meal. He had been brought here with nothing but the tattered remains of his clothes and the shattered pieces of his equipment. His combat suit, which had once protected him in countless engagements, was now in tatters, barely covering his body. He could still feel the searing pain in his side, where one of the mercenaries had wounded him in the scuffle. The wound had gone untreated, the blood congealing on his skin, the pain throbbing beneath the surface. It was only a matter of time before the infection set in, and his body would no longer be able to fight. The mercenaries had made sure of that, leaving him here to rot, knowing that the jungle's predators would eventually take care of him. It was a slow, cruel death they had set in motion, one that would strip him of his dignity, his strength, and his life. But there was something else, a feeling, deep within him, that refused to let go. Even as his body grew weaker with each passing minute, a part of him refused to accept this fate. He would not go down without a fight. He could still hear the sounds of the jungle shifting, the low growl of a beast somewhere beyond the trees, the creak of the branches as if the entire jungle was watching him, waiting for the moment when he would finally break. But Rax refused to let it happen. He would not allow the jungle to claim him, not without a fight. And then, as if in answer to his silent challenge, something shifted in the shadows. It was at the edge of his vision, too subtle at first, but growing larger as it moved closer. Rax's breath caught in his throat as the low rumble of something much larger than anything he had seen yet began to fill the air. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, the thick leaves of the trees shivering as the creature, whatever it was, approached. His heart pounded in his chest. He could feel it, the weight of the moment, the crushing anticipation of the inevitable. The chains that held him became suddenly irrelevant. It didn't matter how many times he strained against them. It didn't matter how much strength he had left in his battered body. He was nothing more than prey now. And yet, as the creature's shadow grew larger, as its massive, muscular form stepped into the light, Rax's defiance burned brighter. The creature that approached was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was sleek and covered in scales that shimmered in the dying light of the sun, its muscles rippling beneath the surface. Its eyes were glowing, a fierce yellow that seemed to see right through him, its elongated mouth filled with jagged teeth that dripped with a saliva that glistened in the low light. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of Rax, and it moved with a grace that belied its size. There was no doubt in Rax's mind that this creature was the apex predator of the jungle, a beast born of the land's dark, primal hunger. Rax's heart raced as he looked up at the creature, his body still trembling from exhaustion and fear. But in that moment, as the creature's glowing eyes locked onto his, something inside Rax clicked. There was no way out. He had no weapon, no way to fight back. His only chance was to survive, to live long enough to break free. He knew that his fight had only just begun. The beast let out a deafening roar, shaking the trees around them, before it took a step forward, its claws scraping against the ground as it circled him. Rax was trapped. There was no escape. But just as the creature leapt forward, preparing to strike, something happened, something that no one, not even Rax himself, could have predicted. A figure emerged from the jungle's dense foliage, a man, a human, covered in dirt and blood, but with eyes full of determination. The figure was tall, muscular, and with a sharp, dangerous look in his eyes. He was holding something large over his shoulder, a weapon of some kind, and without hesitation, he swung it with incredible precision, striking the chains that bound Rax's wrists. With a loud snap, the chains broke free. The shackles fell to the ground with a resounding clang, and Rax was free. The man did not speak a word. His eyes only flickered toward Rax for a moment, as if to make sure he was okay before he turned back to face the beast. The jungle roared as the massive creature lunged at them. But this time, Rax was no longer the helpless prey. The man stood beside him, his weapon drawn, ready to face the monster head-on. For the first time in what felt like ages, Rax felt something surge within him, something fierce and unstoppable. This man had broken the chains, and now they would both face the jungle together. The chains were a cruel reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The cold metal that dug into Rax's wrists, biting into his skin with every movement, was all that remained of the life he had once known. His once proud military uniform was nothing more than shredded rags, the vibrant colors of his people's emblem barely visible amidst the dirt, sweat, and blood that coated his body. His muscles ached from the unnatural angle in which he was suspended, the chains holding him against the rock, his arms stretched above his head like a trophy for some cruel hunter. The only thing that kept him going, the only thing that refused to let his mind give in to despair, was his relentless will to survive. Rax had been captured by a group of alien mercenaries, a race of ruthless bounty hunters who thrived in the lawless sectors of the galaxy. They had found him in the midst of a war, a soldier among thousands. But when the battle had been lost, and his army scattered to the winds, they had come for him. He had fought valiantly, of course he always did. But there was no escaping them. No escaping their cold efficiency. The moment he had been captured, he knew that the best he could hope for was a swift death. Yet here he was alive, chained in the heart of a savage jungle, the mercenaries' cruel joke playing out in real time. They had left him here for the beasts. These jungle creatures were vicious, terrifying monsters that would rip him apart with no hesitation. The mercenaries hadn't even bothered to kill him outright. They had simply abandoned him as bait, left to be picked apart by the jungle's denizens. There was no honor in this death. No glory. Only pain. The thought of death was a constant companion now, gnawing at him like an insistent itch that he couldn't scratch. But Rax's eyes, tired and bloodshot, still held on to one thing: defiance. He would not go down like this. Not without a fight. He would not let the jungle claim him, nor would he give the mercenaries the satisfaction of watching him perish like a helpless animal. His mind raced with thoughts of escape, of how he could break free from the chains, how he could fight back against whatever horrors the jungle would throw at him. But each time he tested his limits, each time he strained against the chains, pain and exhaustion gripped him, pulling him back into a state of grim acceptance. But then, in the distance, there came a sound that broke the monotonous hum of the jungle, a low, guttural growl. It echoed through the trees, a warning from some unseen predator. Rax's heart thudded in his chest. The beasts were near. They had been watching him since the moment he was left here, no doubt circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His body tensed, and his mind went sharp with survival instincts. He couldn't afford to freeze now. The growl intensified, and through the dense foliage ahead, Rax could see the dark shadows of something moving, something large and powerful. It was coming closer. The massive creature's shape was slowly revealed as it approached through the thick underbrush, its glowing eyes reflecting the dim light of the jungle. It was a hulking beast, its body covered in thick, matted fur, and its elongated claws gleamed in the dim light as it prowled closer to him. Rax's breath quickened. He had no weapons, no way to defend himself against something like this. His mind raced, searching for a way out. There had to be anything he could use to fight back. The chains wouldn't budge. He was helpless. The beast was nearly upon him now. Its snout, dripping with saliva, twitched as it sniffed the air, drawn to the scent of his fear. Rax's pulse thudded in his ears as the creature took a step closer, its massive body blocking out the dim light as it loomed over him. The growl from earlier had turned into a throaty snarl, its massive jaws parting to reveal rows of jagged, sharp teeth. Rax had never seen a creature like this before. It was a nightmare come to life, its eyes wild with hunger. It was everything he had feared, everything he had hoped to avoid. But now, there was nowhere to run. The creature's long tail lashed out, swinging like a whip and striking the ground near him with a terrifying force. Rax's mind clicked back into survival mode. The pain, the chains, the fear, they all melted into the background. There was only one thought in his mind now: survive. Without warning, just as the creature reared back, preparing to pounce, a sudden movement from behind it caught Rax's eye. A figure human emerged from the shadows of the trees, a tall man dressed in tattered, mismatched armor, covered in dirt and scars. His face was hardened by years of survival. His eyes locked onto the creature with an intensity that sent a shockwave of hope through Rax. Before the beast could react, the man lunged forward, slamming a heavy weapon into the creature's side, knocking it off balance. The beast snarled, but the man was unrelenting, moving with swift precision as he pressed the attack. Rax's eyes widened in disbelief. He had thought he was alone in this jungle, abandoned to die. But this man, this human, had come to his aid. The creature roared, struggling to regain its footing, but the man was relentless. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate. He moved like a predator himself, striking with calculated fury. The sound of metal against bone filled the air as the man landed a heavy blow to the beast's skull, and with a final, earth-shattering roar, the creature collapsed, lifeless, onto the jungle floor. For a long moment, Rax just stared at the man in shock. He had expected his death to come at the hands of the jungle beasts, but instead, he had been saved by this stranger. "Are you?" Rax started, his voice hoarse and weak. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his attention to Rax's chains, his eyes scanning the situation. With a swift motion, the man pulled a sharp tool from his belt and cut through the chains with an ease that made Rax's jaw drop. The man's gaze met his, and without a word, he helped Rax to his feet. "You're lucky I found you," the man said, his voice gruff, but there was a quiet respect in his tone. "These beasts don't play fair." Rax took a shaky breath, still trying to process what had just happened. He had been chained, left for dead, and yet here was someone, a human, who had come out of nowhere to rescue him. He had thought his fate was sealed, but this man had changed everything. "Who are you?" Rax asked, his voice gaining strength as he stood up on his own. The man gave him a sideways glance, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Name's Caleb," he said simply. "I don't know who left you here, but I know how to survive. And if you want to keep breathing, we need to move." Rax felt his heart rate slow, his body finally allowing the rush of relief to wash over him. He was free. For now. But he also knew that the jungle was still far from a safe place. The beasts would return, and the mercenaries who had abandoned him would likely come looking for him too. He wasn't out of danger yet. But for the first time since he had been chained and left to die, Rax allowed himself a small, weary smile. "Then let's get out of here," he said. Chapter 2. The journey begins. The air in the jungle seemed to grow even thicker, more oppressive, as Elias Caleb, as he had introduced himself, led the way through the dense underbrush. The sounds of the jungle, once ominous, now felt more like an immediate threat. Every rustle of leaves, every movement in the shadows made Rax's heart race. His body was still adjusting to his newfound freedom, the weight of the chains gone, but the lingering effects of pain and exhaustion still very much present. His muscles ached from the strain, and his head swam with the effort of trying to process everything that had just happened. He had been abandoned in this jungle to die, left for the beasts to feast upon, and now against all odds he was alive, free, and following a mysterious man through a jungle filled with even greater dangers. Caleb, or whatever his real name was, didn't seem to be concerned about the creatures in the jungle, his eyes scanning the path ahead with the kind of calm efficiency that only someone who had survived in a place like this could have. His movements were quick but calculated, his every step purposeful. He had obviously been here before. Rax kept a few paces behind, his limbs still stiff from the pain and the long hours spent chained to the rocks, but his mind was clear now. Caleb had saved him, and that was all that mattered. Yet, as they moved deeper into the jungle, Rax couldn't help but feel the nagging suspicion that this man who had appeared out of nowhere to rescue him was hiding something. There was more to Caleb than he let on. His eyes told a story of years spent in the wild, of hardships and survival. But Rax wasn't sure if Caleb was a friend or just another survivor, someone who would leave him the moment he became an inconvenience. "What's your plan?" Rax asked after a few minutes of silence, his voice raspy but steady. Caleb glanced over his shoulder, his face impassive. "Get out of the jungle. That's the plan. I'm not staying here any longer than I have to." Rax raised an eyebrow. "And you just found me? Like that?" Caleb didn't slow his pace. "The jungle's not as empty as you think. People get lost in here, and others get left behind. I find them. I help them when I can." Rax studied him for a moment. "And why help me?" he asked, curiosity getting the best of him. Caleb's eyes flicked toward him for a split second, narrowing slightly. "Everyone deserves a chance. If I didn't help, I'd be no better than the bastards who left you chained up like that." Rax could feel the weight of Caleb's words settle in, and for a brief moment, a small piece of trust began to take root. But there were too many questions left unanswered. How had Caleb survived here for so long? How was he so prepared? And, more than anything, why had he chosen to rescue Rax instead of running off on his own? The questions kept swirling in Rax's mind, but for now, he kept them to himself. The path became narrower as they moved further into the jungle. The trees grew closer together, their branches forming a thick canopy overhead, blocking out most of the sunlight. The air was damp and sticky, clinging to their skin as they pushed forward. Every so often, Rax would hear the sound of something large moving in the brush-heavy footsteps, the snapping of branches, and each time, his heart would skip a beat. But Caleb didn't flinch. He just kept moving forward. They stopped for a moment by a small stream to refill their water skins. The water was cold and clear, running over smooth rocks, and the sound of it flowing through the jungle brought a sense of calm that Rax hadn't felt in days. Caleb didn't waste time drinking, though. He was too busy looking around, his eyes scanning the trees, the ground. Rax could tell that Caleb was alert, always aware of his surroundings, never letting his guard down. After a few moments, Rax broke the silence. "So what now? We just keep walking?" Caleb's eyes shifted briefly to Rax, and then back to the jungle around them. "We make it to the edge. Once we're out of the jungle, we can figure out where to go next. I've got a place nearby, a safe spot." Rax didn't question him. He could see the determination in Caleb's movements, hear the resolute tone in his voice. There was no doubt that Caleb knew what he was doing. Still, Rax couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more Caleb wasn't telling him. But for now, he was grateful for the help. There was nothing else to do but follow. The day passed in a blur. They moved quickly, covering as much ground as they could before nightfall. Rax's body protested every step, but he ignored it. The jungle, as alive as it was, seemed to quiet as they neared the night. The growls of the predators faded into the distance, and for a moment, there was an eerie peace. But Rax knew better than to think they were safe. The jungle's beasts were patient. If they didn't strike today, they would strike tomorrow. As the last remnants of daylight disappeared, Caleb set up a small camp. He had a fire going quickly, expertly tending to it as Rax sat back against a large boulder, trying to stretch out the stiffness in his muscles. His body was still sore from the chains, but he could feel a renewed sense of strength building within him. "Tomorrow, we'll be out of here," Caleb said as he adjusted the fire, his back to Rax. "We'll make it." Rax didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on the crackling flames. It felt good to be free, to not be bound by the chains anymore, but there was still so much to do. So many unknowns. And yet, for the first time in days, he had hope. They might not have much, but they had each other, and that was more than he could have hoped for when he'd been left to die in that jungle. "Thanks," Rax said quietly, looking at Caleb's back. Caleb didn't turn around, but Rax could hear the faint rustle of his clothing as he stood. "No need to thank me," he said, his voice steady. "We're in this together now." The night fell completely then, and the sounds of the jungle ominous, persistent seemed to surround them. Rax tried to sleep, but his mind raced with what had happened, with the uncertainty of what was to come. They couldn't outrun the jungle forever. They couldn't keep running from the creatures, or the mercenaries, or whatever else this planet had in store for them. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in this fight anymore. As sleep finally claimed him, Rax allowed himself to relax for the first time since he had been left chained to the rocks. He was still alive, and that was enough for now. Chapter 3: The Beast Within. The sun barely rose over the horizon before they were on the move again. The jungle, though seemingly calm in the early hours of the morning, was still a place of unpredictable danger. Rax didn't question the speed with which Caleb moved, nor the quiet urgency in his movements. There was no time for hesitation here. They pushed through the thick undergrowth, moving steadily, with Caleb always in the lead. It wasn't long before they encountered their first problem, a massive river that cut through their path, rushing with a violent speed that made the water look like a churning mass of destruction. The current was strong enough to sweep anything away in an instant. Rax looked at Caleb, who had already begun to search for a way across. "We can't swim across that," Rax muttered, eyeing the swirling water. "I didn't plan to," Caleb said, glancing back at him. "There's a bridge further down, but we'll have to move fast." Rax didn't argue. They moved downstream, keeping the roar of the river at their backs as they made their way to the bridge. The jungle seemed to grow quieter, the air heavier, as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. Something was off, and Rax could feel it. As they neared the bridge, the first creature of the day appeared. A massive, serpentine beast, with scales like iron and eyes like glowing embers, slithered out from the brush, blocking their path. Its body was long, stretching for what seemed like miles, and its fangs were sharp enough to tear through steel. The bridge they needed to cross was directly ahead of the beast, and they had no choice but to face it. "Get ready," Caleb said, unsheathing a blade from his belt. He moved forward with the same lethal precision Rax had seen before, his eyes narrowing as he prepared for the fight. Rax stepped up beside him, his body still sore from the previous day's ordeal. His arms, still stiff from the chains, felt like they might give out at any moment. But the sight of the beast fueled something within him. They couldn't afford to run. The creature hissed, its massive body coiling, ready to strike. "This isn't over," Caleb muttered, meeting Rax's gaze for a split second. Rax gritted his teeth. "Not yet." The serpent's eyes gleamed, glowing with an unnatural intensity as it swayed on its thick coils, assessing the two humans standing before it. Its breath hissed through the air, a foul stench of decay and rot emanating from its mouth. Rax felt a surge of adrenaline as the creature's tail flicked menacingly, sending a cloud of dust and leaves into the air. There was no way to outrun it, not with the river roaring behind them, and the bridge ahead blocked by this towering nightmare of a beast. Caleb's eyes were locked on the creature, the blade in his hand held at the ready. He didn't hesitate, didn't waste a single moment. He moved like a man who had faced death before and knew how to dance with it. He rushed forward, closing the distance between them in an instant, and with one fluid motion, he slashed the blade at the serpent's scaled hide. The creature recoiled slightly, the sharp edge of the blade cutting a long gash across its side, but the beast wasn't deterred. Instead, it let out a shrill hiss, and its massive head lunged forward, jaws wide. Rax's heart raced, his survival instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. The serpent's venomous fangs gleamed as it snapped toward Caleb, and Rax knew there was no way to escape that kind of strike. In a split second, Caleb ducked under the fangs and rolled to the side, narrowly missing the creature's strike. But the beast wasn't finished. It swiped its tail, sending a massive shockwave through the ground. Rax, still stunned, finally snapped into action. The man who had saved his life was in danger, and he couldn't let that happen. His eyes locked onto the nearby rocks, scattered in the path of the river. He ran, finding his footing on the slick, wet stones, his heart pounding as the serpent's focus shifted back to Caleb. He needed to do something, anything. Caleb wasn't giving up. He was relentless, striking at the creature with every opportunity. But Rax could see that it was only a matter of time before the beast wore him down. His body was still recovering from the ordeal in the jungle, and though he had strength, it wasn't enough to face this monster for long. With his mind racing, Rax found the rock he was looking for. A sharp, jagged edge protruded from the stone, perfect for what he had in mind. He grabbed it, feeling the sharpness of it in his hand, and sprinted toward the serpent's side, hoping the creature was distracted long enough for him to strike. Rax threw the rock at the serpent, aiming for its eyes. It was a desperate move, a long shot at best, but it worked. The rock hit one of its glowing eyes with a sickening thud. The creature shrieked in pain, its coils tightening violently as it thrashed in agony. That moment of distraction was enough for Caleb. With swift precision, he lunged at the serpent's exposed flank, driving his blade deep into the soft, vulnerable flesh. The beast let out a guttural roar, thrashing violently in its death throes, but it was too late. The blade found its mark, and the creature crumpled to the ground, twitching for a few final moments before going still. Rax, panting from the effort, staggered backward, his heart still racing. His body felt like it had been dragged through the ringer, but he couldn't afford to rest yet. Caleb stood over the creature, breathing heavily, wiping the blood from his blade. He glanced over at Rax, his face grim but not without a trace of approval. "Nice shot," Caleb said with a small grin, though his voice was still tense. "You're not as helpless as I thought." Rax nodded, his breath still uneven. "Guess I owe you twice now." He couldn't help but chuckle weakly. His hands were shaking, his heart still pounding in his chest. It hadn't been easy, and he had been close to dying twice in as many days. Caleb sheathed his blade and began walking toward the bridge. "We're not out of danger yet. Come on, we need to move before more show up." Rax followed quickly, but the weight of what had just happened hung over him like a cloud. He had almost died twice, and yet here he was, standing beside the man who had pulled him from certain death. The path to the bridge seemed clearer now, though the air was thick with tension. Rax's mind churned as they made their way toward the crossing. He had always known that survival in the jungle would be hard, but he hadn't expected it to be like this. Every step felt like a fight against something bigger, something unforgiving. The bridge was just ahead, and they reached it without incident. Rax paused for a moment to take in the sight of it. A narrow, rickety structure made from the thick vines and roots of the jungle, swaying gently in the wind. It was nothing like the sturdy bridges of his home world, but it would have to do. Caleb stepped onto the bridge first, testing the stability before he motioned for Rax to follow. The bridge creaked and groaned under their weight, but it held strong enough for them to cross. They reached the other side in relative silence, and Rax found himself breathing a sigh of relief. But there was no time to rest. The jungle was still full of dangers, and they couldn't afford to wait too long. They needed to get as far away as possible before nightfall. Chapter 4: The Final Stand. As they pressed deeper into the jungle, the sense of danger only grew. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the jungle floor. Rax felt the weight of exhaustion setting in again, his body still aching from the strain of the fight, the chains, and everything that had happened. But Caleb seemed unaffected, pushing forward without slowing. His focus was sharp, his steps quick and sure. "We're almost there," Caleb said, glancing back at Rax. The camp's just over that ridge. Rax didn't question it. He trusted Caleb's judgment. He had saved him, and now he was leading him towards safety. But even as they moved forward, Rax couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. He had felt it earlier in the jungle, the presence of something watching them, lurking in the trees. The beasts weren't the only threats in this jungle. There were others out there, things that weren't bound by the rules of survival that humans or animals followed. The jungle itself seemed to close in around them, the trees becoming thicker, the air more oppressive. And then, just as they rounded the corner of a large rock formation, they stopped dead in their tracks. In front of them, standing tall and imposing, was another group of mercenaries, the very ones who had left Rax to die. Their dark, armored figures stood like silhouettes against the fading light, their weapons gleaming menacingly in the shadows. The mercenaries had been waiting for them. Well, one of them sneered, his voice thick with amusement. Look who we found, running off with our little prize. Rax's blood ran cold. This was it. He had hoped for a second chance, but now, here they were, face to face with the very people who had caused his misery. The mercenaries weren't here to negotiate. They were here to finish what they had started. Caleb stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You should have stayed in the jungle, he said, his voice low, dangerous. But I guess we'll take care of this now. Rax knew there was no way to talk his way out of this. The mercenaries had no interest in him alive, and Caleb was outnumbered. But they had a chance in opening to fight. With the jungle on their side, they might be able to turn the tide. In a flash, Caleb unsheathed his weapon, and Rax, with every ounce of strength he had left, joined him. The fight was swift and brutal, the sounds of weapons clashing echoing through the jungle as the two fought side by side, their movements in sync. Rax felt the power surge through him again, the fight for his life reigniting every fiber of his being. And for the first time since he had been chained and left for dead, Rax felt alive again. One by one, the mercenaries fell, their bodies crumpling to the ground as Caleb and Rax took them down. The last of the mercenaries, a large figure with a cruel grin, raised his weapon, but Caleb was faster. The final strike was clean, precise, and the man crumpled to the ground with a final, gasping breath. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the heavy breathing of the two survivors. Rax stood, panting, looking at the wreckage of the mercenaries, and then at Caleb. Thanks, Rax said, his voice hoarse but full of gratitude. Caleb wiped the blood from his blade and gave him a grim smile. We're not out of this yet, but we will be. Let's go. And with that, they walked forward into the jungle, knowing that the fight for survival would never truly end, but for now, they had won. Together,